Hello, Bible readers. It is Monday, September 21st. We are reading from Numbers chapter 20, through chapter 22, and then Luke chapter 2, the beginning of chapter 2. As we get into this section of Numbers, we're making a transition. We're finishing up kind of the Numbers is it fits into three parts, and we're getting done with the second part and now entering into the third. I'll say more about that in a second. The first thing I wanted to mention is this sin of Moses. If you'd have asked me before we started this journey, what does Moses do to deserve to not make it into the Holy Land? I thought it was tied to the golden calf incident at Mount Horeb. I thought he was lumped in with the rest of that first generation. But it turns out I'm learning. And what I've learned is there's something that happens here in these chapters we're reading today. And even as I read it, I was unclear about what Moses' sin is. And so then I read in this commentary, the interpretation of the sin of Moses has puzzled interpreters. Scholars debate whether his sin lies in striking the rock, in his character, in his speech to the people, or perhaps in some feature no longer recorded in the text. So that's how clear we are on what the sin of Moses is that keeps him from being allowed to enter the Holy Land. One aspect of Moses' sin, according to this commentator, is his failure to follow the divine command, especially the last requirement of speaking to the rock. The sin of Moses could be described as not having trusted in Yahweh and not sanctifying God before Israel. Basically, what this talks about is he didn't do it exactly right. He was careless and impatient, that the power of leadership is dangerous. And so if you're going to be a leader, you got to do stuff right. And in the process of becoming impatient and not really paying attention to details, he's placing himself above the law, and no one is above the law, not even the lawgiver, Moses. That's part of what this story is trying to convey, apparently. Again, this is not something I would have gleaned on my own. I needed some help on this one. When we get into Numbers 22, the holiness of God was the central theme in the first 10 chapters. The wilderness journey was what the next 10 chapters were about. Once we get into 22, we get into this last part that we'll be reading about. And this is about where the setting changes from the wilderness to the plains of Moab. From the wanderings of the first generation to the preparations for Canaan by the second generation. And so you're going to see them have a new census, instructions for a calendar. They're going to set up cities of asylum in Canaan. This is where the preparing for Canaan on the plains of Moab starts to happen. So a real movement starts to happen. So that's Numbers. As we look at our text from Luke today, that's a heavy commentary. You might have heard that in the background. As we look at our text from Luke today, there's two things I want to address. And one is the chronological accuracy in dating the birth of Jesus. If we would really take a lot of time in thinking about that, we'd miss the point of what Luke is trying to convey. Some people get stuck on this. Quirinius and the census under him do not match the other dates that Luke brings up. Luke should not be read as a historian. An obsession with accuracy leads a reader astray, is what my commentary says. Luke needs the emperor and a census in the picture because he needs to get Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem, because that's where tradition placed Jesus' birth. In the time of Herod, and because in the city of David, that was an important messianic credential. If you're going to say he's the Messiah, that's where he needs to be born. So in other words, and this is important, we're dealing not with a scientifically determined chronology, but with purposeful storytelling. I think that's a great phrase to remember. We're dealing with purposeful storytelling. That doesn't make it less true if some of the facts aren't necessarily factual. This is purposeful storytelling. The other thing I wanted to lift up is that Luke is always about nothing very glorious is suggested by the circumstances of the Messiah's birth. That's Luke's way, to show how God's fidelity is worked out in human events, even when appearances seem to deny his presence or power. It is not the circumstances of Jesus's birth would not show that he's going to be some extraordinary something. And that Luke uses that motif a lot. He's good at kind of painting simplicity around what is extraordinary. Luke is really cleverly written, and I know many of us have already read it, but it's good. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.